Good morning and welcome to another Minnesota Banking Minute. I am here with Rob Rempel from Haberfeld to talk about closing the back door on rising customer attrition. So, Rob, historically, what does customer attrition rates look like in the community banking space?
Yeah, good question, Carla. So we've watched this for about 38 years now. And in the last, call it decade and a half, there's been a remarkable downward trend in customer attrition. Now, when I talk customer attrition in this context, we're talking about core customer relationships. Obviously, rate-driven products, rising rate environment, it's just about how much you're willing to pay. We're talking here about that core relationship where somebody identifies you as their PFI, their primary financial institution. And gosh, if you go back to 2000, you would have seen nationwide community banks having 18 to 20% attrition rates. In other words, people were changing banks every 5 years or so. By 2010, that number had dropped to about 15%. And now in 2023, 2024, where we sit, it's down closer to 10%. So the overall trend over time has been downwards. Now, as online openings has become a bigger and bigger factor, one of the things we've noticed is folks who have a relationship with a branch location, their attrition rates are kind of in that 10% a year or so range. Folks who open an account online are very, very different. Their attrition rates are actually about 3 times that number. So again, 2 different customer types. You'd have to look at which ones you're considering for any particular strategy.
So, obviously, we're post-COVID now, we're in a higher interest rate environment. So, how has this all changed given those 2 big things that have happened in the world?
Yeah, I think what was happening over time, if you look at kind of that macro picture, is the sticky products we always talked and hoped for actually became sticky. Online banking, online bill pay, the introduction of mobile banking helped people stick around longer because it's frankly just more of a pain in the neck to change banks than it used to be. We notice in the data that every time you have a big event, a big crisis of some kind, it tends to make attrition drop. So the Great Recession, for instance, in the aftermath of the housing crisis, we saw attrition take a pretty good drop and then kind of stabilize. During COVID, we saw attrition drop pretty significantly. And I think it's that instability that makes people less likely to change things in their financial lives. I think I'll just hang on and see how things turn out. In the aftermath of the most recent episode with COVID, we've actually seen attrition tick back up a little bit. So it kind of bottomed out around 8%, and it seems to have creeped back up to around 10.5% across the country. We think in large part that's just what's going on in the economy. Again, you had a long period of a zero rate environment. What's the point in looking around if rates are absolutely irrelevant? Economic uncertainty in a few of those windows and timeframes. But if you look at the last couple of years where deposits are cool again, you have the mega banks spending literally billions of dollars to get core customers. So if you're a community bank and you're spending the same amount on getting core customers, you've fallen way behind. We're seeing offers of $500, $700, $900 for a core checking relationship being offered by the mega banks. So again, you combine some uncertainty, you combine like rates are going up, I might look around a little bit with huge piles of money available to me if I'm willing to make a switch. It's kind of no wonder that we've seen that attrition tick up in the last couple of years here.
Absolutely. Now, I've got to tell you, Rob, changing your core bank is a pain, right? It's a lot of inconvenience. You've got, your checking account, for example, may be tied to all of these different places where you pay bills. So I've got to imagine it's not just rates that would cause a customer to leave. So what step can a bank take to mitigate attrition or customers leaving?
Yeah, if you're trying to drive attrition at other banks, in other words, steal their customers, there's very little you can do to make somebody change banks. It tends to be driven by lifestyle events. They move away and you're not convenient anymore. They get into a marriage and want to combine their money. They get out of a marriage and want to separate their money. It tends to be driven by lifestyle events. Now, the flip side of that means it's really hard to control for attrition because most of it involves things that are happening in that customer's life that are really hard to overcome. So if you're looking at how we can do something to mitigate that attrition, there's really a couple areas you need to look at. One would be service, right? One of the reasons people leave is they have a service experience that doesn't match their expectations. And that drives them to look around. So again, we have to be willing to ask ourselves hard questions. Is our service as good as we think it is? Or are people quietly leaving? Most people won't be vocal about it. They'll simply disappear and go look for a better option. I noticed, and this is sort of a corollary to that COVID phenomenon, we had a lot of people we would talk to who were having some service challenge, having staffing challenges, but really hesitant to deal with it. Like if we let this person go, even though they're not great, we don't know if we can replace them. The problem is if a core relationship's worth, according to our data, over $4,500 over its lifetime, doesn't take very many lost ones to make up for the fact that you need to have some staffing changes in that. So one thing is make sure your service really is as good as you think it is. A couple other things that are under your control. At that account opening, when you get a new customer, doing everything you can to deeply engage them with your institution. Carla, you observed the sticky stuff really is sticky. Yeah. So let's make sure on day one, we get the online banking set up. We get them connected to our mobile banking app. We show them what it takes to get e-statements, all of those kind of things. Let's do that on day one. Let's give our front line some tools to make it likely that those things actually occur. Second piece would be in the onboarding process. We've noticed that in that first 6 months of a relationship, you're at a lot of risk. Attrition in the first 6 months is dramatically higher than in the rest of the life of the relationship. So what do we do in that first 6 months or so? And what we've seen be successful is a combination of personal outreach, a thank you card that goes out on day 2, right? A phone call at week 2, just to make sure they're happy, they've gotten connected with all the things in the account they need, and then maybe a phone call around day 45 or day 60 to see what other opportunities there are to serve their needs. You take some personal outreach like that and combine it with some automated outreach, just an email drip campaign to offer some products and services they don't have that you think might make their life better. Combination of those two things can have a pretty meaningful impact on attrition as well. And then if we think about kind of the last area, when someone's trying to leave you, is there an opportunity to save the relationship? We think every branch ought to have something like, you could call them an account retention specialist. Someone comes in and says, I need to close my account. The answer is, well, of course, we'll be glad to help you with that. Let me introduce you to Carla. She actually can take care of that for you.
Okay.
We've been trained to have that conversation effectively. Oh, I'm glad to help you in whatever way you need. Can I ask you a question? What's causing you to close this account? Is it an account you don't need anymore? Is something in your life changed? And then you intelligently address it as it comes up, right? If somebody's moving away, well, maybe we should talk about those banking conveniences that we have that make it possible to literally bank anywhere, live anywhere in America, and do business with us through mobile banking, mobile deposit, and things like that. If it's an occasion where we've perhaps lost trust with that customer, a service challenge, right? A couple different questions. Would you be willing to share with me how we could have done better for you, right? And listen and take in that information and promise that you'll get that to the right people to address that in the future. And then maybe simply ask them a question like, hey, would you be willing to give us another chance to earn your trust back? I'd really appreciate that. And we respect their decision in either way, but it's amazing how often simply recognizing their concerns, promising to address it, and asking nicely for another chance gives you another at-bat. And if you can fix that problem and do better in the future, you actually get more loyalty than if the problem never happened in the first place. So we think those 3 things are probably your best opportunity to control for that attrition challenge.
And those are 3 really, really great tips. It's amazing. It all comes down to listening and response, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Rob, so much for giving us some great information to think about. Thank you for joining us for this Minnesota Banking Minute. If you have any further questions or you'd like to reach out to Rob, his contact information will be following as we go along. Thank you so much. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.